record on this computer. Okay, we are now recording. Welcome everyone to the 2020 LSTA Project Management webinar. When I talk about project management, I'm not talking about you guys out in the field doing all your activities. I'm talking about it from my perspective, which is the paperwork perspective. So this is about how you're going to document everything that you do and all the paperwork that we need to have. Okay. Again, if you feel free to unmute yourself or write any questions in chat. Okay, so when I talk about paperwork, it's documentation and it's telling your story. LSTA is federally funded. It's a federally funded program. And what we're doing is telling stories about what you're doing with these funds to our elected officials. So if we have any history majors, right, we have primary source materials, and that's how we know what happened 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago. And it's the same with your grants. Through your paperwork, through your documentation, we can tell our stories to IMLS, to the people who authorize IMLS's budget every single year, to the people who authorize LSTA funds every year. Right, so it's super, super important. If you've had an LSTA grant before, it's pretty much the same. Nothing's really changed on what you need to collect, what you need to report. We have one new thing. IMLS has a new publicity policy, and we'll get to that, but it's almost exactly the same as last year. If you're brand new, then feel free to jump in and ask questions if I go too quickly. Okay. So when I ask you for paperwork, for reports, you may wonder what I'm talking about, because sometimes it only gives you a paragraph. It gives you 160 words to tell me what you're doing, right? So we have to balance too much information with not enough information, and it's really hard. It's really hard. But when you're writing your reports, your quarterly reports and your final report, just bear in mind your audience, right? So literally anyone should be able to pick up your report and totally understand what you were doing. It should be super brief, an overview, a summary, and then there will be sections for details. And I have in there anyone, anywhere, in any context, including audits. I added that because I was just thinking about this lately. I try at the State Library to work to what I think the auditors will expect to see in the documentation, and those are my auditors. I also keep all the backup that I know IMLS wants to see. And they have a 100-page checklist of all the details that they'd like. So when I ask you for things, it's because I know IMLS will want to see it. You have your own auditors, right? So it would be good to know what your auditors would like to see from you. I don't know if it's different, but I know when I ask you for things, I know it's because this is what I have to have, right? So that's that part, but also because that leads to a little bit of dryness, we like to collect stories. So there are sections in your report for anecdotal stories. And I do use those. I do cut and paste them and send them to IMLS, so they'll be able to say, this actually happened in this library, and here's a story, and here's a photo of people who benefited. So please, throughout the year when you're doing your project, don't forget to take photos and jot down stories. It's just so great to share them, right? And if you get a photo and it's super good, I will send it to IMLS and they might want to share it, so don't forget to get permissions, okay? Does anyone have any comments so far? This is just context, right? This is like, I'm asking you for all this stuff, but this is why we're asking you for this. Okay, so now we're gonna get down to the agenda. I would like to start off with a discussion of COVID-19. And then we'll go over the 2020 LibGuide, which is where everything you should need ever will be living, the GIA, which is our LSTA contract, the surveys, reimbursements, that's how we get your money to you, the quarterly reports and the match documentation, and then the final report, records retention, the new IMLS credit that I just mentioned, and our limited English proficiency. This sometimes falls by the wayside, but IMLS asks us to make sure you know about it. So we have our own Nevada policy, and I'll point out where it is, okay? Okay, COVID-19. If you have a competitive grant, right, we were cruising along, everything was fine. You wrote your grant as if we were going to proceed as normal, and then things like happened, right? So we gave you the opportunity to reconfigure some things, right? But that was in April, and things change daily. When we did the final GIAs, I also asked you for some backup documentation of what you would do for health and safety and COVID protocols and library openings and not. So I did that so we have all of that backup in your file, right? Because your grant, your application, all of that, that's essentially your grant scope of work. This is what you're doing in order to get the grant funding. And so we have it there. But as we know, things keep changing like daily. So if you have major changes into your activities, we definitely have to know. Like I just need you to tell me that I cannot do this because we are not opening, but this is what I would like to do instead. Our grant activity says we're going to do this, we're going to do this instead, and outcomes are going to be the same, right? So you can email me, we'll have it in writing, and I will put it in your file, and that will be good. As long as it doesn't impact outcomes, right? We always want the outcomes to be the same. You're doing this so that your target audience will benefit, right? And the way you get there changes a little bit, but we still get there in the end. We just want to document it. If you have to change your budget, the budget is pretty much set. You can change things within your budget. So you say you want to buy ebooks and instead you want to buy print books or vice versa. Those are all materials and supplies. So you can change within there, but you have to document it. And just send me an email. I said I was going to buy $500 worth of ebooks, but we've decided to shift the way we're doing anything, and we have way more demand for in-person, so we'd like to buy print books, and this is how it's going to impact outcomes. Okay, it's all good. But if you decided you wanted to take your book budget and use it to buy a service instead, and you don't have any funds in your service budget category, that's more than a 10% change, and we have to have the Deputy Attorney General sign off on it. And that's fine, it just requires a little bit more documentation and it takes a little longer. So basically what I'm saying is whatever you have to do to adjust for COVID to make your project work, we can probably make happen. We just have to go through the paperwork, okay? Oh, the very first thing, August 31st deadlines. So when we started this LSTA year, it was just going to go business as usual, July 1st to June 30th. Start July and July, 12 months. There was always some cushion available in case you needed to do an extension, in case you needed a few extra months to get your project done. But since I feel everything is still going to be uncertain for a while, we just built in 2 extra months. So everybody gets 2 extra months, no matter what. If you don't want those 2 extra months, that's cool. You just tell me my project ends here. It does, but it doesn't, I mean, your project period will still go to August 31st. Okay, and so your deadlines, you'll still have an extra bit of time for all of your final reporting deadlines. it just feels better to have those 2 extra months, okay? Okay, oh, any questions about any of that? Okay, we'll move on. Okay, so here's the LibGuide. You've probably seen it. It's where you got your grant application. So you've already done the apply part. Now you're in the manage part. I was going to share, I'm just going to share this screen. All right, do you actually see my screen? 2020 LSTA manage? Yes? Someone put in chat? Oh, no. Oh, good heavens. Sorry. Do you see that now? All right, sweet. Okay. I hope everything in the world that you will need will be here. You can still call me anytime, email me anytime, but here's the grant manual, your reimbursement forms, so you can get paid, the time and effort. So time and effort we'll get to, I think, but if you are using LST to pay for any salaries, you've got to fill out this federal timekeeping form, okay? The quarterly report is right there. If you want to revise your budget where there's more than a 10% change, you fill this form out. Here it says we are not doing any project extensions because everyone just got the extra 2 months. I don't have the final report updated for 2020, but if you want to look at an example, this is from a few years ago. It's from a project UNLV did. You can see what a final report looks like. Evaluation and report are used interchangeably sometimes. Activities, when you apply for your project, I asked you to put everything in buckets. You're doing instructional things, you're buying content, you're doing a planning project, or you're procuring stuff that's not content. So you report it in the same way. So what I'd like to do with the final report is embed all of these separate pieces into the final, so that's why it's not there yet. Let me shut the door. I am still working from home. My dogs are rather yappy. So anyway, final activities are reported separately, but I'm gonna embed them in the final application, so you won't have to keep going to all of these different forms and missing them and forgetting them and whatever. Okay. Final survey reports, all the surveys, all the required surveys, those go on a separate thing too, and I'm going to try and embed those too. So you have an activity, you have an instructional activity, you surveyed your people. This is where you report the aggregate results. If you want to see what the questions look like, these are the questions. You can take this form and edit it and do whatever you want with it. And then here are all the webinars, they're listed there. Publicity, any kind of publicity, the logos, IMLS logos are right there. The NSLA PR transparent background logo, social media hashtags. There's a draft photo release template if you want, allowable cost tip sheets, all that. Okay, so that's the 2020 Manager Grant LibGuide. You could bookmark it, right? Any thoughts, questions? Okay. I'm going to go back to sharing the PowerPoint. Okay. We're back to the PowerPoint, correct? Okay. So that's the LibGuide. Next up on the agenda is the required forms. You all have sent these in. That's great. I want to just go over if you get any other kind of LSTA grant during this 2020 grant year, you're set. We just need one set of forms per year. Every new grant year from IMLS, the state library has to recertify everything. And in turn, we make all of the subgrantees, we ask all of the subgrantees to recertify everything. So you've already done yours, you're good. If you get another mini grant, if you're a public library and you get a CARES grant, same forms, okay? Next up is the grant and aid. So that's our contract. Your certified official signs it and our state librarian signs it, and that means we have a good contract and we're ready to go. Your application, all of the things that you've sent describing how you're going to proceed, including your budget, those are the scope of work for your contract. Your GIA is going to have your grant number on it. So if I'm like, what's your grant number? And you have no idea, it's right there on your GIA. I will also tell you if you ask me. It's got the project dates, the award amount, the record retention dates in case you need to look at those. And importantly, it's got the federal grant information. So if you have to get this grant approved by anybody on your side, your board, your county, and they're asking you what the grant number is, it's right there. It's 4531020 for this year, and then it's got the actual award number, LS00. It's got all of our authority. And then it's got contact information, which is the generic NSLAPR LSTA email and my email. Any questions about the GIA? It's your contract, right? Don't ever lose it. Okay, I want to talk about surveys. We've been doing surveys now for, I think, 3 or 4 years. But starting in federal fiscal year 18, and we're in 20 now, IMLS started requiring them, like no opt-out, you have to do them. And the reason they're doing it is because they're trying to give you tools to help you with your outcome-based evaluation. So when you're writing your final evaluation, your final outcomes, and you're kind of stuck on how you measure the change, right? You've got these surveys. I surveyed these people and 90% of them said this, and here are some comments. So based on the results of these surveys, this data, I can safely say that our project accomplished this, right? It's a tool to help you with your outcomes, but it's not an optional tool, okay? You can have all sorts of other surveys if you want, but you have to do these. Got it? Okay. So when to survey? You only have to survey for 5 different occurrences. If you're doing an instructional program, so that's any kind of class or training or workshop or after-school program where people are learning, you do a survey. Right now, this is an instructional program for the library workforce, so we're going to have a survey at the very, very end, and I'm going to ask you the standard questions, and then I will report those results to IMLS at the end of the year. Okay, if you're buying content that is for your library staff, you have to survey them on whether or not they think it was good. You don't survey the public for content acquisition. So if we just did a program where we bought digital supplies for library staff to do digital programs, right? I've got to survey those staff to see if they thought this stuff was worthwhile, right? If you're planning, when I say planning, it's formal. It's not just planning an evaluation on, we're going to plan this program, we're going to see if it worked. It's sort of a formal written document that provides a framework. So if you're doing a planning grant, survey your staff. I don't think anyone here has a planning grant this year, but right. So this is it. They're not that bad. 5 questions. But I do want to talk about survey fatigue because we want meaningful results. And if you're doing like a series of programs, if you're doing a series every week, you don't need to survey the same people over and over and over and over again because they're going to get tired and they're just going to start checking things or not turning them in. So if you have like a 3-month-long program, you can survey at the beginning and at the middle and at the end, or whatever you feel is best. You have to do the surveys, but I'm not telling you when you have to do them. Does that make sense? So if you're just doing a one-time thing, please do the survey. If you're doing an ongoing thing, you can kind of figure out when the best time is, right? Or if you're introducing a new element, so you've been doing this all along and then you introduce a new element, maybe you have to do a survey and find out how effective that was, okay? So surveys are important, they're mandatory, but it's up to you to figure out how often, okay? Any question on that? If you have any questions about this, you can call me and we can talk it out. I've done that before and it's been super helpful for me too, to know like in practice when things work and when things don't. Okay, next up is reimbursements. So you've got the grant, but Nevada is reimbursement only. So we do not give you the funds up front. You buy the stuff, you expend your grant first, and then you submit a reimbursement request, okay? And the state requires invoices and receipts and proof of payment. It's just, this is a flat out state rule. They want to see that you have bought the stuff and they want to see that you've actually paid the vendor. So just keep copies of all of that. The state doesn't reimburse sales tax. So don't submit a reimbursement for sales tax. If you have, again, if you have hired a temporary staff or extended hours, if you're using any of this LSTA for salaries, we have the federal timekeeping form. You just document what they're doing for the scope, per the job description and how many hours. Okay, and that's required when you're asking for salary reimbursement. Okay, and then on the reimbursement form, this is all where you document. Also, excuse me, also where you document your match part. There's no set schedule for reimbursements. Like you don't have to do them every month or every quarter. You might want to, because the longer you wait to ask for reimbursement, the longer your library is covering that cost. So I suggest you establish a schedule quarterly. That'll work. But I'm not gonna poke you every quarter and ask for your reimbursements. That's up to you and your library. Okay. Any questions about that? When you submit the reimbursements, I attach that GIA to the back of it to show that we have authority to pay you. Just FYI. It's all good. Okay. The reports. So written reports, there are 4. One for the first 3 quarters and then a final one. The final one, so you have until August 31st for your grants. You can submit the final evaluation, the final report, as soon as you're done, as soon as you're ready to go, as soon as everything's expended and documented and the books are done. But it's absolutely due by November 1st. Okay. This is what a quarterly report looks like. Well, it's not what it looks like, but I think it's 3 or 4 pages long. But these are the questions. Do you feel the grant is helping you provide better service to your customers? Like, you don't have to answer yes to everything, right? Part of the grant documentation is understanding what's going on and what works and what doesn't. We want to know if you're on track, and you don't have to be on track. Like, you don't, because COVID is crazy. Actually, the world is what it is, and we try and keep going. And if you're not on track, you just tell us, right? Just document it. And then the budget, it's just a summary, but it's sort of a poke for me. If you say you've expended this and you've asked for reimbursements, like, I need to make sure that we've actually reimbursed you. It's good. It's checks and balances, right? It's just a reminder for all of us where we are in the timeline, because your project had a timeline, right? So here we are in the timeline. We are on track. Here are the challenges. It's all good. I actually take a lot of the narrative from your quarterly reports and I put it in the final report. Like, I kind of just, what's the word I want? Your final report's here, but oh, here's some really cool stuff that you noted in your quarterly report that wasn't on the final report, so I submit that to IMLS too, so they have a better sense of the progression. Okay, so it's due October 31st or November, wait, first quarter is July, August, September, so it's due at the end of October. And then we have one that's due at the end of January, and that's due at the end of April. And then there's no fourth quarter report. The next one is your final. Okay, got that? Questions? Okay, so here's the final report. And here, right here is the example from a few years ago. We want a big summary, a big 30,000, 40,000 foot view. All of these sections should be standalone sections, right? So here's what I did. Here are all the partners I brought in. You don't have to have partners, but if you do, like, tell us, document. The activities, it's all the instructional activities, all the content that you bought, all the survey reports. The outcomes are going to be based on your surveys and your activities. We did these activities, this many people participated. You know, we had outcomes because they told us, and we have this data, right? The number of circulation of items, number of website hits, that sort of thing. Lessons learned is very, very, very important, because these all go into the final state program report searchable database. And it's helpful, right? We did this, and this is something we would like everyone who would like to do something similar to just be aware of. It's important. Lessons learned is how we progress forward, right? Sustainability is how you will not necessarily keep doing the project, but keep doing the good that has been done with your project, right? You want to keep the momentum going. You don't necessarily have to do the exact same things, but you're keeping the outcomes alive. Final report has budget and match sections. You're going to describe in overview terms. I bought nonfiction books. I bought this service, these performers. Okay. And all of your anecdotal information, all of your photos, if you have any kind of press, if you have any kind of links, we put those there and we send those to IMLS so they can see, because they're 3,000 miles away. They don't know you guys, not really. But they see, oh, we have this library in this part of Nevada, and they did this great thing, and they can see it, right? They can see the data. So that's your audience. Your audience is not you. You know what you did. It's people who don't know what you did. All of your little narrative sections should be standalone too. So I could just read, you did story times, right? I have this little paragraph that lets me understand. It's not, oh, we did story times. That's not enough. It's, we did story times targeting this group and we had this many attendees, and why did we do this? So standalone narratives, okay. And why do we do this, right? See this here, IMLS, SPR, IMLS.gov. All of your reports get put in this public searchable database. You can go in there and look at what everyone in the country is doing. Get some ideas, get inspiration. But your final report will end up here too. In a year and a half from now. Okay. All right. And they're due November 1. You can submit it before if you're done, but they have to be in by November 1st. All right. Please share all of these links with anybody on your project team. Right? These are not proprietary links. If you have other people doing other things and they want to know what's going on, it's all good. The more people who know what the project paperwork is like, the better. Okay. Comments about this? Thoughts? Does that all make sense? Seriously, ask me anything. You can email me. Okay, records retention. So all of this paperwork that we're generating, the state is format neutral. So what that means is whatever format that you locally store things on, we're good with, but you still have to store them. You have to retain them until December 31st, 2026. There's an explanation of how that date exists, if you want to know, or you can just mark it on your calendar, December 31st, 2026. These things stay, and then you destroy them after. And these are all of the documents you should keep, okay? Any official project stuff. If you've emailed to ask if you're allowed to do this and I say yes, you can put that in your file. You should put that in your file. If you're just emailing me in general, question that's not specific to the grant, that really has no relevance to your actual project, you probably don't. Okay. That makes sense? And this bottom link, that's the IMLS records retention backup. Okay. Limited English proficiency. We have our own Nevada document right now. We were using the federal IMLS limited English proficiency, but I think a year and a half ago, I wrote our own for Nevada. All it says is you must make meaningful attempts at accommodation, right? And we sort of leave that up to local discretion, but it should be meaningful. Okay. This is the new part. This is what is new for federal LSTA year 2020. Oh, this part is not new. This has always been. You must credit IMLS. And I did site visits last year. This was sort of the most overlooked aspect of your project management. If you do a flyer for an LSTA funded program, you should put funded by federal dollars, put the IMLS logo. Not you should, you need to. It's just so vitally important to document how the LSTA allocations are used because they do need to be reauthorized every year. Okay. So if you're buying a collection of books, put a little sticker on it. If you're buying stuff, put a little sticker on it. If you're doing a newspaper ad, put the logo in there. Okay, it's not optional. Thank you, seriously. Okay, here's the new part. It's really specific. So when you're issuing statements, press releases, requests for proposals, solicitations, if you're going out for bid on something, you have to designate what is funded with federal funds. The percentage of the total cost, the dollar amounts, you need to be very clear with your bidders, or in your press releases, how you're funded and the IMLS is funding you, okay? This is on the LibGuide. The text of this is on the 2020 Manager Grant LibGuide. So if you need to refer back to it, it's always there. This is the new thing, it's important. I should have made this first, but okay, do you have any questions about this? Okay. So this is, when you're doing all your press releases and crediting IMLS, they really want you to tag them. Anything on social media, tag them. Like, it's not hard, it just tags them, right? And it's so helpful. IMLS grant at Institute of Museum and Library Services. You can tag us too. I would love that, but I am not as if you only can tag one person, and I think you can tag as many people as you want, but you have to tag IMLS, please do, right? The other things, if you're doing an event, you can invite us. You can invite us virtually. You can at least send us the invite. I've gone to a couple events and they're really nice. And I take pictures and I put them in the report. If you have a press release, IMLS has asked, instead of sending it directly to them, you can post the press release and tag them. But if you want to send the actual release, send it to me and I will send it to them and they will make sure it goes to the right people on their end. Okay. The credit line, there's an official credit line. There really is. We know in theory that's absolutely what you need to do. In practice, sometimes there's less room if you have a little tiny book. At the bare minimum, I was advised you should say this project is made possible by federal LSTA funds, like at the bare minimum. Put a logo. Any thoughts about this? I can't wait to see all of your tags on social media. Okay. Site visits. So we do site visits for two reasons: to look at your paperwork and then to look at your project. And they're really fun. I enjoyed them a bunch. And they're not nitpicky. Like, the purpose isn't to find everything you've done wrong. It's actually to just really see what you're doing. And then we just kind of check off that you're complying with things. And if you're not putting logos on it, I'll just say, could you put logos on it? Right? It's just, it's more to celebrate what you're doing and make sure that we have answered any questions, and that you feel comfortable. We're not doing in person. We're not doing anything in person this year. All travel has been removed from our budgets, or my LSTA budgets. So no travel. We might do virtual. I have no idea what that would look like. But I feel the site visits are important just so we can see, right? It's good to know. It's good to share what you're doing. And anyway, if we do, this is what we look for. We want to know your activities. We like to talk to your staff who are actually doing things that we have no idea about. The participants, if possible. I don't know how this will work virtually. But this is what we ask for. Okay. And then, any questions about that? Oh. We're at the end. This is my contact info. The generic email for all of your paperwork is NSLAPR, Nevada State Library Archives and Public Records. It's an L, not an I. So NSLAPR and then LSTA at admin.nv.gov. And that goes to me and Tammy Westergaard and Norma Fowler and Bruce Douglas. So it's everyone in library planning and development gets this. So in case something happens to any of us, your paperwork is there. I would advise you to do a read receipt for anything. Just to know, I try and respond, got it, thank you, but sometimes I don't, especially if you're doing reimbursements, because this is where you submit your reimbursements. All of your reimbursement requests go to this email address. You want to make sure we got it. Sometimes things go to spam. It's very strange, but they do. So do a read receipt. And if you don't get a confirmation from me, you should ask me, because it may not be there. It may just have not gotten there. Technology is wonderful, but sometimes we have to make allowances for the glitches. So read receipt, okay? Okay, we're almost done. Do you have questions? All right. I was trying, oh, goodness, sorry. I was trying to copy the survey link and put it in chat. Okay. To everyone. So, where did we go? I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to stop recording.